Well, welcome to ASHB's quarterly SBC Smart Building Council webinar meeting. My name is Marta Klopotowska, and I'm the Programs and Communications Manager here at ASHB. I will be emceeing the slides today. Note that today's webinar meeting is being recorded and will be circulated to those who registered, including those present today, along with the presentation slide. We'll take a quick look at today's agenda. We'll do a call to order, welcome, introductions about the SBC for those that are joining us for the first time and who are unfamiliar. Just a couple administrative items. We'll get into a few research updates here at ASHB, a couple of our research projects that are taking place here. And then, of course, I think what most of y'all are here today for, our keynote, Making Building Analytics Pay Off, Turning Energy Data into Measurable Performance with Brandon Voyles and Scott Holstein from ABV. And then lastly, we'll have just a couple updates on the ASHB podcast, our white papers, research library journal, any new business, if anyone would like to raise any, and a couple announcements and adjournments. And with that, I will pass it off to Bob, our SBC chair.
Thank you very much, Marta. And speaking on behalf of myself and the vice chairs, really appreciate all the work and coordination that you put in to have this quarterly meeting.
Happy to help. Thank you.
Thank you. So welcome, everybody. Appreciate everyone attending. Obviously, it's no good having a meeting without having all of you here to contribute and listen and share thoughts on future meetings and so on. So we have a great meeting set up for today. As you know, I'm Bob Allen, the chair of the Smart Building Council. I'm with NAVCO, Senior Vice President of Sales for our East region. Not on the call with us today, but certainly a contributing vice chair is Harsha Chandrasekhar, as well as joining us today, Vice Chair Robert Lane and Vice Chair Chris Larry. Thanks, guys. Appreciate all of your support and looking forward to a good meeting today. Some of you being new to the call, to give you a little bit of history on the Smart Building Council, we were established in 2001. And we focus on advancing the large building automation industry through technology-driven research and collaboration. We do meet quarterly, and we try to identify emerging technologies and opportunities and support strategic initiatives while we explore developments related to integrated systems and automation in large buildings. Our work promotes the next generation of intelligent building technologies with a holistic view on improving building performance, operational efficiencies, and energy savings. So with that, I would like to go into the approval of the past minutes. They can be found at www.ashb.com/SBC. The minutes and the meeting notes from our February 11th meeting are available there for you to look back on at any time. And I will consider them approved unless I hear any objections raised. Are there any objections to approving the minutes as posted? Therefore, the minutes are approved by consensus. If any objections are raised, well, there are no objections that are raised, are there? So we're good. Let's keep it moving. Mr. Lane, please take it away for our research update.
All right there. As we all know, ASHB and its former CABA has undertaken a number of research projects over the years. Basically, we have probably one of the best background knowledge of what smart buildings and buildings are all about. Currently, there is a new research project called Smart Buildings Trends and Technology Adoption. It was started in April. It currently has 14 funding organizations across the smart building industry. And the research findings will be informed by surveys of roughly 300 commercial building owners and operators across the United States and Canada. The funders will also serve on the steering committee and are currently selecting 6 trend analysis topics that will form the basis of the core of the research. The total research value of this project is about $80,000 US. And it's going to be released exclusively to the project funders in the fourth quarter of 2026. If you'd like to learn more or discuss participating in future ASHB collaborative research projects, you can contact ASHB at administration@ashb.com. Back to you, Robert.
Thank you very much. Next, we will move on to our keynote presentation by Brandon Voyles and Scott Holstein.
I think I'm going to do Bob, I'm just going to do a quick update on some of the research project that we have.
Oh yeah, great. Sorry
about that.
Yeah, I was just I guess thanks both Bobs. So the other research project that we have really in the commercial space is this one, the annual BACS Building Automation Control Systems Market Sizing research project. This is around $108,000 research project that we've commissioned to BISRIA to do. Basically brought forward by Siemens a few years ago, back in 2021, and we completed a 5-year term of this particular project, and it's been very successful. Essentially, companies are sharing their market data throughout North America on various different parameters like software, like supervisory software, BEMS and things like that, and hardware, some like the routers and things like that, and controls like room controls and some field devices where you're looking to expand it into. They're sharing their market data. We're providing the aggregate so they can determine their market share and how it changes, and we're producing reports on a quarterly basis. We just started this project. It's going to be in another 3-year term. So we finished the 5-year. We're going to another 3-year term, and we're looking to well, these are the funders that are on board so far. And if you're involved in BACS and controls in the building space, and you want to get involved in this particular research project, share some data and get some market share, definitely reach out, because there's still opportunity to there's a couple funders that are looking to join the project at this time, and there's still opportunity to. It's a good time to start before we start collecting the data. And going forward with the project. But this is definitely an invitation-only research project, because it involves sharing data and getting data at the same time. So if we go to the next slide, this is where the first one in North America, and we're expanding it out into Europe. The idea is that mid this year, hopefully we'll be able to expand into this similar project with a similar scope in the European market, looking at some there's opportunity to get involved per country or for several country bundles. I think some of the main ones would be Germany, France, the UK, Italy players. But if you're interested in getting involved in this project, or you're dealing with BACS in the European market and want to get involved, it's also a good time, because we're looking to launch this project mid-year for another about 3-year term. So this will be a new project for us in the European space, and but I know there's many on the call that may have some interest. So if you're interested, reach out to myself, Greg, at walker@ashby.com, or you can reach out to Marta or anyone on the ASHB team. So thanks a lot,
Greg.
both Bobs.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So Greg, just that European project, is it just breaking down by the individual selected countries, or are we also doing a general landscape of Europe as a whole with the breakdown by certain countries?
Well, I think it's going to be we're going to do a breakdown of several different countries, and then there's an opportunity if some companies may be only doing business in, say, Germany. So there's a way for them to opt in to just provide the Germany data and get the Germany data, and then there's some that are maybe want 5 countries or 6 countries, and then there's a model where you can get those countries and then they get the data in those particular countries. We're still trying to work it out, and some of the details about the data collection. It's definitely a lot more complex than the North American one, with all the different countries involved, especially considering some organizations break down and collect data on a continent basis, but and others do it by a country basis, and it's harder to get the full scope. But there's different options, and if depending on the size of your market in the European space.
Awesome. Appreciate that. And I mean, as always, just a great opportunity for people to get their logos on a real meaningful market research and position yourselves as leaders in the intelligent building industry. So thanks, Greg. Appreciate the question and answer. Cool. All right, hearing no other questions, let's now can we finally get to number 4? Very
Yes.
excited for this one. With us today, we have Brandon Voyles and Scott Holstein. They'll be discussing how building analytic programs can deliver long-term operational and energy savings beyond dashboards alone. Drawing on insights from the U.S. DOE's Smart Energy Analytics campaign, this session will explore practical strategies for proving ROI, sustaining performance improvements, and overcoming common adoption challenges. Brandon is a regional sales manager for the South Central at ABB HVAC Building Automation and Controls, where he works with system integrator partners to deliver HVAC controls and smart building solutions. With experience as a control systems designer, programmer, and a sales engineer, he focuses on scalable building automation strategies, maintainable system architectures, and turning complex technical challenges into practical, repeatable solutions. Brandon is also a frequent speaker at industry organizations, including ASHB and AEE, where he presents on energy analytics, building automation, system modernization, and operational best practices. Scott is the West Region Sales Director at ABB Building Automation, where he leads growth and development of the company's system integrator channel across the Western United States. With more than a decade of experience in building automation and smart building technologies, Scott has worked extensively across commercial real estate, healthcare, education, and hospitality markets. With a strong focus on connected and sustainable building solutions, he is also a frequent speaker and contributor for organizations and publications including ASHRAE, AEE, APPA, NFMT, AutomatedBuildings.com, and FacilitiesNet. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. Please take it away.
Yeah,
Thank you for the introduction. Yeah, we're excited to talk about this. This is a topic that Brandon and I started delving into about a year ago now, and the timing couldn't really be better. Just the way that things have progressed in the AI world, and as a result, the analytics piece of things in building automation. So we're really excited. We've done a similar presentation to different groups, but we're really geared towards this group kind of going into the technology progression, but more so the practical application of analytics. And obviously, we're going to reference a really well done, extensive study by the Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory. But before we get into any of this, just to lay some groundwork here, I'd like everybody to take this Zen moment. So if you're a building operator or a building OEM or a building geek in general, imagine you've finished a project. Your system is perfectly tuned. The report is signed, and the design intent has been made real. Now, that's where the Zen moment typically ends, because the next question is, how long does that actually last? So performance decay or building drift, whatever you want to call it, typically sets in, could be days or weeks. If you're lucky, maybe months, but it happens fast. And then you come back to the reality of, why is this the way that things operate? And part of it is just the complexity of these systems as a whole and trying to integrate all of these different things together. We have our system integrator network is up against an aggressive construction schedule and fixed budgets, often working in a silo from the mechanicals, and then they're the last ones on the job. So they're doing their best to get everything out the door. And enter the energy analytics or energy management information systems, however you'd like to phrase that, as kind of the resolution for this. And that's really, what we want to talk about today. we now have the tools to slow down that drift, or at least keep the building within some of the parameters of the original design. And, I mentioned the first time we did this presentation, we talked about a lot of these challenges, and we'll talk a lot about the practical challenges of implementing analytics and where the industry has started and where we are today. But it's been interesting. It just, from the last time we did this similar presentation in October to today, a lot of what we kind of talked about as possible solutions have come to life. So we've gone from basically the manual tagging to a lot of AI tagged schema now. And we've gone from basic rule-based testing and fault detection to some more adaptive type diagnostics that provide root cause analysis. So analytics, even in this, call it 8-month period, have come a long way, given the AI of it all coming into play. But we've even seen the adoption rate start to increase. And that's really one of the things, and one of my goals for today is to kind of pull back the veil on some of the challenges that the market is facing, to implement this and catalyze some more adoption. Because I think that we are at the perfect crossroads of technology, energy requirements, and a variety of other things that have just really been culminating for a while now. And I think we're finally there to deliver it. So what hasn't changed in analytics yet is the adoption. So that's really what we're trying to do today. And we're gonna bring you some data, starting with one of the most comprehensive real world studies of these systems done by the Lawrence Berkeley National Labs, prepared for the U.S. Department of Energy. And we really just want to give OEMs, system integrators, a blueprint of what to expect, and what kind of things you can do to enable your teams with selling, implementing, and leveraging analytics for energy savings and service purposes. Brandon, go on ahead, take it over from here.
Yep. Thank you, Scott. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. It is a pleasure to be here and excited to talk about analytics today. So the study was obviously massive. Scott's going to get into it here in a little bit. But before we get into that, I want to reiterate a little bit about some of the things he's already mentioned and why analytics came to be, and where it's heading. So if we historically take a look at where buildings have been in the past and where they're actually at today, whether it's a 50,000 square foot building or less, all the way up to 1 million square feet, with the accelerated construction schedules and tighter budgets, what we're seeing consistently as we move from design to building turnover for owner occupation is it doesn't always match the exact intent of what was designed. And so with this, you can see in this graph where from day one, we're already starting to drift away from design conditions as the building gets progressively used more, as more or less people enter and exit the building. And then you add to that the fact that, there's complex sequences in a lot of these control systems that very well could change over time, because what was set up right when the building was turned over may not necessarily be the exact tuning parameters that need to exist in a different season, for example. So you see changes there. A lot of times those aren't even documented or validated after the commissioning process. And then another thing we'll see is a lot of sensors will eventually start to drift, but even more so is operators tend to put overrides into different set points within the building. Oftentimes they're forgetting about that they put them there. There should be a timed override. And then what we start to see is the building starts to control well outside its intended range. And then as they forget about these set point changes, these timed or untimed overrides, that tends to go on for quite a bit of time to where it can go from different operators going unnoticed with different operators. And the last but not least is probably the biggest one here is the one-time commissioning process. I'm a huge fan of post-project commissioning, verifying that everything works correctly and as intended. However, as we all know, this is very much just a one-time event to go through validation. And that also a lot of times that commissioning is set aside to where you don't go through every single piece of equipment and every single sequence. It might be a sample size that allows you or allows the opportunity for something to be missed. And then given that this is a one-time action, that's probably not going to be, done again for another 5 to 10 years in retro commissioning. The time in between that is where the building really starts to degrade in its performance. So the answer to that is what we're going to talk about a lot today, not only just the analytics piece, but the business plan that supports it and how you combine those together to make a full commissioning process that is repeatable. So if we look at, what are the things that a building operator or, engineer is responsible for on a day-to-day basis? Well, for one, it's to keep everybody comfortable, and it's to keep the building operating and keep it operating by minimizing as much energy as possible. So they're already being asked to do a lot of things. And one of those is to perform preventative maintenance across a wide range of equipment, like we can see in this list here. So this is the ASHB aligned preventative maintenance frequency chart, that's based on VAV boxes, cooling towers. You can see that some of these are just annual, where they could be quarterly. But the point is there's probably not a lot of people that are actually following this to a T. And I'm sure there's other guidelines out there that are followed. But the fact is this is a very reactive approach a lot of times that building operators are taking. So it's a lot to keep up with, for one, and given the short manpower that exists within buildings today, keeping them up maintained, asking them to do more without the tools that provide them additional value and give some indication of what's going on in all their connected equipment is already asking too much. All right, so as I mentioned, analytics is just one piece of this. What we're seeing and what the study focused on a lot, we're going to talk about this in a little bit, is called the MBCX process. And we're actually seeing some success with this within our own system integrator network. And that's combining the project commissioning piece and extending it through the life of the building with the analytics as a tool to supplement that proactive approach. So you can incorporate any type of analytics tool as part of the commissioning process and extend that. Or there's other means just for energy management purposes or FDD, all that we'll get into, that you can add. Every provider has several different products in their portfolio that probably will meet somebody's needs. So how does the commissioning and analytics piece work together? Well, as I already mentioned, keeping up with everything after commissioning is very labor intensive. It's prone to human error. And eventually all that work that was done at the commissioning baseline is thrown out the window, right? We set up this building for perfect conditions after design. And then as soon as it's occupied, all these changes start happening. So instead of allowing that to happen immediately, we take this baseline from the commissioning process, have the analytics tools in place, whatever those may be, and we combine them to provide real value from the building so that they can make real-time informed decisions on equipment that's failing or potentially going to fail before it ever happens. And it allows you to prioritize and make decisions based on the cost of a fault, for example. And then another part of that is that analytics gives you a better view into your energy management consumption or your peak load conditions and so forth. So combining all this together gives us all the value or all the data that makes the building, or that brings us real value so we can control it better. All right, so just a quick quote here. The question is no longer whether analytics can identify savings, which we're going to see in this study that it's very, very possible to do. It's getting more popular, but it's whether organizations can consistently turn insights into sustained operational outcomes. And that part is important because I think a lot of us have found out in the past is that there was adoption of analytics tools for the sake of adoption and just seeing how they work. But there was never really plan in place from the facilities team or the service provider. So that two parts, the analytics and the plan to implement it, is the most important thing that came out of this study. All right. Back to you, Scott.
All right, so a few definitions we want to make sure are out there. Many of you are probably familiar with these, but wanted to make sure everybody's on the same page. So EMIS is an umbrella term for all things building analytics. EMIS is Energy Management and Information Systems. Then you'll see the Energy Information System, EIS, is your, it's going to have your energy usage intensity, your heat maps, your load profiles, predictive models for energy use. I'll show you an example of that momentarily. And then FDD, of course, is fault detection and diagnostics. So where your typical building automation alarm is a threshold for a single condition, fault detection and diagnostics, at least historically, has been a rule or model-based approach to looking at multiple building automation system points and be able to interrelate them to identify some of the more complex and systemic issues that we see out there. And then the diagnostics piece of this, I think, it is what exactly it says it is. It's identifying the fault, and then the diagnostics piece is going to be quantifying that impact, and in some cases even suggesting a solution. Brandon touched on MBCX. This is your monitoring-based commissioning. So it does streamline the initial commissioning efforts and keeps building automation systems operating within that design intent. But the continuation of that is really what is most important. And I think that from a system integrator standpoint, bringing this to an end customer, it's a means of holding themselves accountable. So when they can show in a comprehensive report and a comprehensive dashboard that they have met the design intent of that particular project, it does a lot to keep them in line. And then because a lot of the heavy lifting was done in that initial commissioning, that's where this becomes a much simpler process to continue this as a service offering going forward. All right, next slide there. All right, so just a little bit of a deeper dive into fault detection and diagnostics. So traditionally, like I said, this works. The way fault detection and diagnostics works is by writing a script that matches the design intent that'll essentially flag the deviations in the actual data. So along with those flags come the diagnostic portion, which provides a clue as to what that issue may be. Now, what I've seen lately has been really encouraging on this end. So where the rule-based, where fault detection and diagnostics has been very much rule-based and has been very kind of strict in some ways. If you don't have the rules written exactly as they need to be written and those points aren't perfectly tagged, that's where you may miss the boat and it may not work. So it was a much more rigid system. So what I've seen more recently is what I'll call like adaptive analysis. So instead of matching fixed point types to a rule, the analysis engine is asking a series of questions for each piece of equipment. So ultra simple example, and you would never really run this as a script or anything like that. But if you were trying to find out, is the air handler unit running? So the engine doesn't require a specific fan status point in this case. It evaluates a decision tree. So it can say, you could say, is the AHU status, or is there an AHU status point? If there is, then we want to use it. If not, is there a fan command? If that, use it as a proxy. If there's not, then is the fan speed, if there's a fan speed and it's greater than 0, use that. If not, if there's a measured discharge airflow greater than a threshold, use that. And you get the idea. Rather than having that one specific script, now these systems are smarter than ever and are able to answer these questions. So whichever path has the valid data is the one that gets used. And the diagnostic output is the same, regardless of which combination of points were available to reach that conclusion. And then the prioritized work list is, I think, the biggest part of this, which I'll leave more for Brandon to talk about from an operational standpoint, because we want to talk about this from a technology standpoint, but realistically, a lot of the barriers exist from an execution standpoint. But that prioritized work list is one of the things that make it very appealing from a service standpoint. Next slide. So this is your EIS example, your energy information system. So this is going to be a little bit more of a rudimentary tool for your dashboarding and reporting. Now, you'll see in the first example there with the purple line and the green bars. The purple line is your energy target. It's going to be based on historical data plus a driving factor like occupancy or heating or cooling degree days. But in this scenario here, you can see where the expectation for energy usage was 0 over the weekend. You could see there was obviously a lot of energy consumption there, and you can catch something like a chiller running over the weekend before it ends up on your energy bill. And then the example next to that, so you can see the energy usage intensity across the building. So there's a continuous base load there. So if there were no base load, that blue area outside of normal hours would be white. So clearly there's some non-essential equipment that are probably running out of hours. So with these EIS platforms, you're able to identify some of these anomalies that kind of come up and are fairly obvious from an energy management standpoint that something is amiss. Next slide, please. All right, and the first example here is of fault detection and diagnostics. I really like this one because not only does it say, hey, here's the fault, it shows you the fault, the duration, the cost, which I love. I know that's a complex calculation, and I don't know how reliable that type of data is for all applications, but it shows you when and where it occurred, and most importantly, an explanation of what the fault is and a recommended action, and also a priority level. So when you're trying to figure out which fault you want to address first, and when you have limited bandwidth, there's that choice that needs to be made. You can address the highest priority issues. Now, one of the other things that have come along since we started this over a year ago is you're not just getting this standard set of recommendations. These recommendations are so much more dynamic now based on all of the inputs and the ability that AI has to analyze that data. The second example is just showing commissioning scripts that were run after hours, and you can see the scores based on the results. And it allows you to run all of these tests after hours, get the report. You can do it remotely. It is just incredibly handy. And the way we've seen some integrators bring this to market on the commissioning side is this is built into their commissioning process now. Rather than putting 120 man hours into commissioning, they're now putting in they're putting in 40 hours of software and programming time, and they're able to then run this after the fact. And that's that monitoring based commissioning piece. Now that the big work has been done on the front end, you're really getting to benefit from that after the fact by checking on your design intent and how that building's running 1 year later, 6 months later, 5 years later. So the idea here is you're turning this flood of raw data into actionable insights that are tied to real financial impacts, and you're cutting out the operational waste of going to do preventative maintenance on something that may not need it. Next slide. So getting into some of the numbers that came out of this study. So as you'll see, we had, the study covered 104 different companies or institutions, over 500 million square feet, the majority of which came out of the higher ed and office vertical markets. And you had 40 EMIS products used. So this study spanned a lot of different products, a lot of different implementation methods. And that's what makes it all the more encouraging to me, is this isn't, there was one approach that was successful here. This just shows the general advocacy and the legitimacy of this, of taking this approach. Next slide. So in the study, 4.1 trillion BTUs were saved, an estimated $95 million across these portfolios. Now, to be fair, these were not solely attributed to EMIS use. There were some other energy-related projects happening simultaneously that may have had some influence on these numbers. However, across all of these different facilities, the implementation of EMIS was the consistent thing here. And that's where you start to see the difference between the EIS approach and the FDD approach. So where we see the 9% savings on the FDD side and the 3% savings on the EIS side, honestly, when I saw the 3 cents per square foot, 9% on the FDD, I was kind of a little underwhelmed. I was like, it's not case study numbers to me, at least on the surface. But what is case study worthy is that with both of these approaches, there was a 2-year payback. And I think if you told any building portfolio owner, we're gonna run this and you're gonna have a 2-year payback, and then beyond that 2 years, it's all money saved and money in your pocket. That's where I think it has the biggest impact. So, where FDD tackles some of those higher energy use systems, it certainly saves more. There is a heavier lift there, which Brandon will get into. But as I mentioned before, even in the last 8 months, that lift has become a lot lighter. And so we're excited to see kind of what's next in this realm as that lift becomes lighter and we can effectively bring this to market. Brandon, you're on mute.
My apologies. So 3% and 9% savings median is pretty solid, but like Scott said, 2-year median payback. You really can't argue with that. But what's not shown in that data is that some of the peak savings were up to 30% on EIS systems, and even 35% on fault detection and diagnostics. So surprisingly, or not surprisingly, probably to most of you, the actions that actually drove these savings across these analytic systems, it really came down to set point refinement. So that could be loosening set points or getting them back on track at least from where they deviated from. And schedule optimization is usually a really big one as well. For the most part, from what I've seen in the past, most buildings tend to have some type of schedule for the building automation system in place already. But oftentimes those are modified to go past the hours that's as necessary, or it's deleted on accident, whatever it may be. Or you could have different, you could need different schedules in place for different buildings or different types of equipment. While also taking into account the fact that you have to weigh on peak load conditions when you're starting and stopping it. So, when do you handle that morning warm-up mode on an air handler versus shutting it down in the evening? So The schedule and the set points made the biggest or most significant difference in those savings. But proactive maintenance was also a big part of that, because instead of allowing end devices to fail, operators were essentially able to troubleshoot those early or stay ahead of them so they can minimize the cost of what that impact would have been on their building. So that very well could be as simple as replacing a valve that was sticking, or a fan that was maybe not even into replacing. It was just locked at a current static speed instead of being a variable speed fan. So all these plays into how you capture savings when it comes to building analytics. And another part of that is you get the ability to establish a baseline or the need for how you're going to spend your money on capital improvement programs or retrofits, whether that's adding new buildings to your campus. The analytics tools or EMIS can help you capture all that data so you can establish, okay, where should my next building be at? Or what improvements can I make from my current set of buildings or on the design side for this newer building that I'm retrofitting or standing up? So as we discussed earlier, the process is even more important than the actual tools that's in place, but they both complement each other very well. But one thing that you have to keep in mind when you're adopting an analytics or MBCX process is that you have to actually establish specific KPIs that matter or are relevant to your goals as an organization. And really, those should be established around first your comfort of your occupants and IAQ. And you can weigh that based on reducing the number of hot and cold calls as you need to. Are we staying below our CO2 threshold? We have ASHB standards that require a certain amount of ventilation. Are we meeting those requirements? And then other KPIs is how efficient are my operations? So see this all the time where you have simultaneous heating and cooling across the building in the middle of the summer when you really shouldn't need heating at all. You have faults that are going to be repeating themselves over and over. So the ability to capture that data and then also verify the value that you're gaining from a monetary standpoint is one of the most important things you can measure from a KPI standpoint. So some of the barriers, or actually the most important barriers that we've historically had to overcome when it comes to adopting and implementing these analytics tools is first the technical piece, which Scott alluded to earlier, is the standards gap and the data quality issues. And that specifically means is that every building automation system across vendors has their own convention for point naming, possibly tagging, and there are frameworks that exist, which includes Haystack, Brick Schema, Real Estate Core. Those are all out there.
What's new, guys? What's new?
But the problem is not everybody is standardized on the exact same thing. And what you get when you try to lay an analytics piece on top of all that data is it takes a very long time to gather all of that information into one place and also make sense of what is what. So we've seen that improve over time. And as Scott mentioned, AI is currently being implemented today that significantly reduce the amount of time that's required to set that up and do all that point mapping. We're also seeing where data tagging is coming standard by default out of the box. So something that we do very well at ABB is we have every site that goes out on our Building Pro platform is going to be tagged by default. So it's always going to be analytics ready. So the AI piece and that EMIS ready platform are the two biggest ways to remove that technical gap. But a lot of times the business case is hard to establish as well. So going back to those KPIs, well, we don't know what tools we need in place if we don't have a good understanding of what we want to accomplish. They'll need to be very well defined. I want to save this much energy as it relates to this much money per year. And I want to reduce my number of man hours it takes to service my air handler in the building. So a lot of that information and value does not get communicated from an analytics standpoint up the chain of an organization. So we have, facilities teams who, may be struggling to keep up with the daily workload. And then you have higher up in the hierarchy is, senior level employees who may not see what's going on day to day, or they don't understand why analytics can help provide additional value to their building, to their staff, and their occupants as well. So it's up to everybody involved, every stakeholder, to establish those goals. We're going to get into that in just a little bit, but mostly line up with what your KPIs are and how you're going to get to those. And this kind of ties into the user time constraints. AI is advancing very quickly. Machine learning, HVAC control systems are becoming more complex. So it's asking a lot to learn on the fly as you go through your day-to-day job. So in addition to a skills gap that is present across the entire industry today, the time constraint is specifically for the building operators who quite literally cannot get to every piece of equipment in a timely manner, and they get this overwhelmed alarm list from FDD or EIS that they really is just kind of a tattletale for them. It's saying you're not keeping up with your job, right? So there's a pushback against that. So you have to frame these tools as this is not a truth teller, but this is a means of supplementing your building's capabilities by allowing your service provider to regularly come in and maximize the value and keep everything fixed. Or if you're doing everything in-house, it's just a matter of triaging which things are most important, and they're saving you the most money and time. And then as opposed to the barriers, some of the biggest drivers we've seen, this has been consistent for quite some time now, is the regulation, right? We see a lot of things going into place, whether it's, New York Law 97 or any ASHB guidelines or any requirements in the construction industry that require you to measure and reduce your energy consumption. But there's also the economic piece of that, where these tools and processes provide real value. So it makes sense from a lot of perspectives to be able to verify those cost savings and then see that we're getting a return on our investment, or that 2-year payback period from implementing this process into our daily workflow. And then the service value that comes from it as well is, you get additional operational capabilities. Something that's not really talked about in here is, automated systems that eventually effectively use AI to tune algorithms or make changes automatically, as opposed to any human intervention. So all these tools are being shaped in our industry today that are making operators not only more efficient, but allows them to really focus in on what matters for their particular buildings or set of buildings. Okay, so what's the execution model look like on this? Well, and we won't dive into major detail on this. You can go look up all the case studies, and they have action plans exactly how to bring this to your buildings. But there's really some core components or stakeholders that should be involved in the analytics process decision, and that usually starts with your owner or energy manager. So all three of these you see highlighted in red. These are the most key people that need to be involved, where your energy manager might be only focused on an EIS system and focused on monthly energy goals or consumption and how to reduce that. Where your facility operator, well, they're probably most likely going to be focused on the operational impact and how they minimize time spent on each ticket that's open, whether that's through an occupant or a piece of equipment that's failed. And they also have to prove that the fix persists through the life of the building, or at least until it fails again. And then in some cases with MBCX, you have your SI or your service partner, SI being a system integrator, where they may serve as a partner and offload a lot of the work that the building operator might do. So there's different ways that they go to market to this. You're starting to see it become more and more popular, but they can help spread the share of some of that workload directly on themselves because it's part of their business and they know how to do it very well. But they use that as a means of making sure you focus on the more simple, or owners focus on the more simple tasks, and they can continually prove that they're a good service partner, and by providing value that is visible, whether on dashboards or however it may be presented. So all three of those are important stakeholders. And then notice the analytics piece is in black because obviously it's not a person, but it's the tool that enables all this together, all of these folks to work together. And of course, as we already discussed, the analytics piece, while there's many different tools that exist, depending on what your goals are, for the most part, they're going to surface and give you a root cause analysis of what's going on every piece of equipment that's connected in your building. All right, so this is a shorter version of what they talk about through the studies and the website, but it really comes down to 3 core steps, and it's plan, implement, and then operate, extending through the life of the building. So the first part is, we already talked about engaging the stakeholders earlier. And that really comes down to not only having those main stakeholders present in all your communication, all your meetings, but you really should establish a champion. And if you have a portfolio of buildings, you probably want to establish a champion for your analytics platform for every single one of those buildings. And then setting measurable goals. Well, it doesn't make sense to measure and monitor anything if you don't even know what you're looking for, right? So we have to have goals we have to have a platform in place that are aligned with our goals. That'll help us not only select the correct products and avoid any ones that are, that don't provide any real service to us, but it allows us to stay on track over time as we move into this implement and operate phase. And then, of course, you have to build the business case for actually implementing this. Like I said earlier, a lot of people hear fault detection or FDD, and it's an instant shutdown. Like, I don't want to hear anything about it. It's really about how you frame it. This is not we're going to provide this tool for you and it's going to solve all your problems. This is part of our business model or how we're going to operate. And this will help you get maximum savings and reduce the amount of service calls or ticket you're going to have to respond to. And then the implementation piece after planning is probably the biggest part right here, because what we discussed earlier is the biggest challenge is the technical barrier, which is tagging and getting all that data into one component. Well, it takes a big lift early upfront on the implementation phase to get that squared where you have everything that you need to see in your building. So usually how you would bring this into a project, owner would issue an RFP. There are templates out there from this organization that allows you to get started and helps you understand the lingo. And then as you get started getting this implemented, that's where you come into the commissioning and then verifying with the EMIS system that everything is working as intended. And then the last part of that is really the training piece of it. Too often we have one person that's managing this entire portfolio of buildings. He or she is the only person that knows how to use the analytics tools. And then if that person leaves, then we essentially just have this very expensive tool in place that nobody knows how to operate or get value from. And then on the operations side, there's different ways to do this. You could do, weekly faults based on the champion of the building or that platform. It could be, bi-weekly, monthly, so forth, whatever cadence makes sense to stay on top of all your maintenance and energy consumption needs. And then going back to the KPIs, really helps to have a scorecard that you can present to leadership, because if they can see the value, on paper or visually through the data, chances are you're going to be able to maintain that program through the life of the building. And then we want to track resolution and persistence over time. This is more or less a no-brainer because that's the whole reason we have this tool in place anyway, or this process, because as issues arise, let's tackle them and prioritize them as quickly as possible. So to sum all this up, the EMIS tools, whether that be EIS, FDD, those are important part of this system, but it's the human intervention and that's required to get real efficiency and maximize the benefits of the analytics tools. So commissioning sets the starting line for a building, and then analytics keeps it on course through the life of it. All right. And that is it on our end.
Great. Well, really appreciate all the information. And if anyone has questions, you can certainly raise your hand or put it in the question and answer box. So I'll kind of kick it off with a question, because it all sounds so good in the PowerPoint, and let's face it, preaching to the choir with the folks on here, we all really get it. But how difficult of a time are you finding with customers in general to buy into all three steps that you laid out? I can see a lot of people doing an implementation and not doing anything with the data, or it falls off, or it becomes yesterday's priority. How are you guys tackling that with the customers?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Bob, because it is a struggle still. I mean, like you said, it all looks good on the PowerPoint, but then when things get real, that's where you have to hold people to what that operational model looks like, and you make those commitments ahead of time. And I think for us, what we've seen work is there is a system integrator involved that's doing that's carrying the bulk of that workload to provide the reporting, to provide the prioritization of fixes and things like that. But I think having it being system integrator led is really recommended for that. And like Brandon said, you don't have one person within the organization who's the champion, and if they leave, then you're stuck with this very expensive piece of software potentially without a whole lot to do with it.
Yeah, so big key is making sure you have multiple sponsors on the customer side, and a solid integrator that really maintains and continues to develop that relationship with the customer.
Absolutely, and I think that Brandon also presented it as, look, this is not when we talk to integrators about this, they're not necessarily bringing this to market as I'm selling you X product. It's in the background, and it's just a part of the way that they service buildings. And I think there's some hesitation because that's maybe a difficult change to make for some system integrators. But as they implement that and it becomes more of a part of their normal operations, we've seen it become immensely successful, and it's a huge differentiator from their end, because we as the OEMs, we've been wanting this to happen for so long, but there's been all of these different barriers, and I feel like we're finally at that place where I think that as a system integrator, it's time to get on board this train. It's going to be you're going to be behind if you don't do it very soon.
Yep, can't agree more. Cool. I don't see any hands up, and I don't see any questions in the chat. So kind of do a going once. Oh, here we go. Ray Douglas put a question in there. He's from Johnson Controls. How much integration are you seeing with the Energy Star application? How important is that?
I've personally seen that as kind of a regional measuring stick at times. Different places use that tool more frequently. But generally in the US, I think the Energy Star measuring stick is one that everybody sees as a valid approach to using, as a standard, if you will, to be able to say, look, we've accomplished X, Y, and Z here. Let me see if there's another part to that question.
We got a new question that came in after. So Antoine was looking to, he asked, does it make sense to streamline the solution regardless of the BAS solution and without needing an integrator?
Does it make sense to streamline the solution regardless of the BAS solution? So to the first question, the answer is most certainly yes. The BAS solution, the typical requirements have been that it's a backnet system, which we're all moving towards. But even for these legacy systems now, there are a lot of tools being built that are allowing for these platforms to be put on top of them. Now, as far as like without the need for an SI, that's where I'd have to understand the question a little bit more, because to me, you're going to get all of these insights, and ultimately the system integrator is the best person to go in and implement those changes.
Yeah, and I agree with you on that, Scott. The value of the integrator is I'm going to ask what utility incentives are covering the cost for the program, especially if they are paid for performance programs like in Ontario. That might also kind of lead into, is this also a performance contracting model?
Yeah, certainly for a performance contracting model. This was a question I did more recent research on, because I thought, you don't hear, at least I haven't heard as much about the utilities covering building automation at times, much less analytics tools. But there seems to have been a move in that direction now. And there are a couple incentives that I saw. And again, speaking regionally, it's different, a little different everywhere. But there are a couple incentives that I saw that are helping cover that upfront cost, which is really the big hump to get over. So it's getting that. I think the utilities are realizing that that's where a lot of the traction, or the traction, but the friction rather, is right now. So I think that's what my experience has been there.
We have time for one more question, and your answer actually dovetails really nicely into it. How do you incorporate the complexity and cost of an EIS or FPD implementation into the customer's value proposition? What do they expect for setup costs and timelines?
Brandon, do you want to take this one, since I've taken all the questions, or you want me to take it?
No, I got you. So one of the it's covered pretty well in the study of like what the median cost is up front. I don't have the figures in front of me, but that data can be shared. So it's certainly not a negligible amount compared to the value they're going to get out of it. But one thing to keep in mind is that, as I said earlier, it's not framing it as we're giving you this tool. It's, hey, this tool is part of our commissioning process. Now, we've been using it successfully on other projects, and we're going to put it in place. And if you don't want to use it going forward, fine. But it's part of our standard practice to do some continuous commissioning. And that's one way you can position it, depending on the tool. And then, so you want to steer clear of, selling anything shiny, right? It's sell the process, not the tool, because otherwise you're having a whole different conversation when you're talking about, here's your building automation system. All right, now here's the analytics platform that, take it if you want, but it'll provide value. But unless you can prove those results or from, past results and how they're going to fit into their portfolio, and they have an established team that you can navigate of champions and stakeholders, it may not be the right fit for them to have a platform like this today. But because it really does take the right people to, even begin to put this into a building.
Thank you. And we are definitely over time, but if you could answer this in 30 seconds or less, it'll be the last question. How would insurance companies take advantage of these analytics? And do you think they would offer discounts to property managers and building owners?
I'm not aware of any insurance incentives that exist today, but that is a great question that I'm certainly going to be looking into at this point.
Yeah, I would say what I could see potentially is, you have obviously metrics around air quality. You have the ability to identify large equipment equipment deterioration so you can plan a little bit better and avoid more catastrophic and more expensive placements. So that would be one way I could see it being used. But like Brandon said, I haven't seen it yet today.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys. I really appreciate your time today. That was really helpful. Nice to see how the whole life cycle is proving out and the cost cycle. So Brandon Voyles and Scott Holstein, again, thank you for spending time with us today at the council.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Bob.
Absolutely. And I did pick up a new keynote idea in there. Maybe we can look for someone in the insurance industry to present to us on how this technology could impact premiums and loss prevention. So moving right along, as I said, we're a little bit behind. Chris, are you ready for the ASHB podcast update?
Yeah, that's great. One of the things that I love about this organization is we have a technical speaker. And for those who like to get into the details and learn about new technologies and really get into the meat of things, another option is the ASHB podcast. The ASHB Smarter Home and Buildings podcast features conversations with industrial leaders, innovators exploring technologies and strategies that are shaping smarter, safer, and more efficient homes and buildings. In a recent episode, Shauna Longo of Legrand joins Matt Trudeau and Sean LeBron of Modern Energy Advancements to discuss how real-time energy data and analytics are helping organizations improve operation visibility, identifying inefficiencies, waste reduction, and support sustainable goals through more proactive energy management strategies, kind of like our discussion that we just had. There's also another recent episode with Harry Kodor of TMA Systems and David Barnage of Watts Water Technologies. And that talked about how water technology and visibility is helping facilities managers turn water data into strategic assets for commercial buildings. And those interested in joining the podcast as a guest or host are encouraged to contact ASHB at admin@ashb.com. And you can access those recently recorded episodes by visiting the website at ashb.com/podcast. So then we'll move on to Ken Wax on the white papers summary. Ken?
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you very much, Chris. We offer a number of opportunities for ASHB members in the Smart Building Council to contribute to the wealth of knowledge in our industry. First, we have the opportunity for you to write original white papers that provide information, and it could be in the form of a tutorial, could cover general materials, technology, marketing approaches. We typically keep our white papers to under 10 pages. If you've got a larger volume of info, we can have an introductory paper and then a follow-on paper for the systems, a follow-on paper for the market positioning, etc. We encourage folks to come forth with white papers. It's been a while since we had a white paper project. And through my involvement with ASHB, I can help you organize a review committee so that if you'd like some help in the white paper and like to get some inputs from ASHB members, we can arrange that. Secondly, we provide information for ASHB based on what others are publishing in the industry. The ASHB staff scours the industry for papers that look potentially relevant for the Smart Building Council. And they circulate it to volunteers within ASHB who review the papers. We have a very methodical review process where we ask the reviewer to provide, to sort of fill in a form with the topic of the paper, the relevancy to our industry, the timeliness of the paper. We ask for about 100-word abstract, and we have a whole list of keywords that we ask the reviewer to check off, so that when you come to the ASHB library looking for a topic, you can enter a few keywords and our software will automatically pick out the relevant papers. We know this takes some work to do the actual review and write the abstract, so we give as a thank you a $25 credit to ASHB products plus $25 in cash as a thank you for your time. Ideally, we'd like each ASHB member to review 3 papers a year, but it's not a requirement of membership. It's be nice to have. We also have the ASHB Journal, which is online at ashb.com under reports. You can find the ASHB Journal. I can say that it's a good outlet for original thoughts. This is more than a white paper. This is your original paper. We're pretty open to the length, the graphics, etc. And I can tell you that I've been contributing to the ASHB Journal for many, many years now. And I work with Marta for each paper submission, and she is very efficient at moving the paper from the Word document into the online presentation. We usually go through a few rounds of edits as I find typos that when I see it actually laid out on the web page, and that Marta is very responsive at working with me to get the article ready to go public. So please consider ASHB as your source of information and an opportunity for you to contribute your original information through white papers and journal articles. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Ken. As always, definitely appreciate it. I know how much work you spend on the white papers and maintaining that and reviewing, and it really is so valuable to the members. So hopefully we all hop on board and review a couple of papers. I know I'm guilty of not doing that. So Ken, I will make a promise to get the 3 reviews in this year.
Okay. Thanks, Bob.
All right, moving on to new business. Is there anyone, does anyone have any new business they'd like to discuss? Things like ideas, new project discussions, or even new agenda items? I probably brought up at the wrong time, but I do think it would be a good idea if anyone has a resource in the insurance world that would talk to us. I think that'd be a great keynote topic. Going once, going twice. All right, keep it moving. Mr. Lane,
Yes,
you have
sir.
some announcements?
Yes, I'd like to announce, I guess everyone that is in the construction real estate industry is aware of Realcomm and IBCOM coming up in June in San Diego, June 3rd to 4th. ASHB will be holding their board meeting and dinner, and we'll be attending the show. Infocom is coming up in San Diego right after that from June 13th to 19th. ASHB will be present at that, along with NexusCon coming up in Detroit, Michigan on October 5 to 7. And last of all, the Greenbuild project will be in New York City from October 20 to 23rd. And we ask members and people on board if they're there, drop by and say hello. That's over to you, Robert.
Thank you very much. Appreciate those announcements. And said anybody who's around, make sure you stop in and say hi to the ASHB team at their booth. Well, that concludes our meeting for today. The next meeting will be scheduled for sometime in August. We'll confirm a date as usual as we get closer. The minutes for this meeting will be posted on the ASHB Smart Buildings page, so you can certainly those probably within a couple of days, maybe next week sometime. And that is it. Marta, are we missing anything for today, or is that wrapped up?
We've covered everything. Thanks so much, Bob.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate the teamwork, guys. We definitely picked up some time after the presentation, which was definitely a time well spent. And again, Brandon and Scott, thank you for your time, as well as everybody in the council that stayed with us. So talk to you guys all in August, and enjoy a start to your summer.
Thanks so much.